Hi everyone. So this is one of the last lessons on this mini course on differentiation for teachers. So today I want to talk about ensino medio, and we're going to be discussing differentiating in response to student learning profile. I just want to make a quick announcement, which is that Carol Ann Thomason mentions in her book that when the educational area started thinking about student learning profile, it was really common to think about multiple intelligences. However, that theory has been sort of discredited nowadays, so it does not mean that we don't have different profiles towards acquiring new knowledge, but um, multiple intelligences is not something that has been scientifically proven. So she does talk about learning preferences, and that's okay. Learning preferences, we do have some evidence that shows that that is something that exists, but multiple intelligences, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I'm saying that there's no scientific evidence, right? So we're going to be looking at what it means to differentiate in response to student learning profile, and we are going to think of some examples together. All right. So the first thing that we have to be aware of is the sources from which Karen Tomlinson got her ideas. So she talks about this researcher, Robert Sternberg's proposed intelligences. I already think that this theory, it's too limiting. I don't think that we only have three kinds of intelligence at all. But I think it helps to know that in school or when we're trying to learn something, we can have these three different approaches. Analytical, which is people who um, analytical tasks or analytical, I don't like calling analytical intelligence, but let's say analytical approach towards learning would be understanding how different parts make up a whole, or planning, or reflecting on different ideas. So it's basically understanding how different little bits of something make up the bigger picture. And then we have a more practical approach towards performing in a class, or a more practical approach towards learning, which is when we get information from context, and we understand from that information, like from the context, how these ideas work. Not necessarily we understand the nitty-bitty or like the tiny parts and how they work, but we understand the general of how it works, and we sort of understand how to apply that idea to a real world problem, for example. And we can also have a more creative approach towards learning, which is focused on shaping the environment in a way that suits an individual's vision and needs. So we can have these three approaches towards learning. Um, But the author, Tomlinson, she also mentions different things that need to be taken into consideration when we are thinking about differentiating in terms of learning preference. So, for example, sometimes it's going to be good focusing on collaboration. Sometimes it might be important to focus on competition. Sometimes it's going to be important to focus on written expression, sometimes multimodal expression, so listening, working with pictures is going to be appropriate. We need to variate between working alone and working together, between more controlled activities and more creative activities. We need to create a balance between concrete information and maybe abstract information. So all of that is going to cater for different learning preferences for our learners. There isn't much of a, I would say, of a secret on how we can learn how our learners feel that they best learn. I feel that the best thing you can do about this is to ask them. So you can create a Google Forms and ask them questions. So I even have the questions here, a suggestion for you, and I'm going to leave them there in the video for you. So look at these. I think this is a lovely idea, like in the beginning of a course, asking learners. So for example, number one, tell about a time when you learned something really well. It might be swimming or skating or drawing or reading. What helped you learn then? Number two, what are the top three things in a classroom that you like because they help you learn? And number three, do you like reading best, or do you like it best when the teacher reads to you? Do you like to draw what you know, or would you rather write about it? Do you like to work alone or with a partner? Do you like to be told just how to do something, or do you like making some choices yourself? So by asking those questions in the beginning of a course, we can understand a little bit more about our learner. Um, Tomilson also says, so she gives us some tips on how to differentiate in response to student learning profile. So the first thing she says is to expand the modes in which you present information for the learner. So we need to include visuals, we need to explore pictures from our materials, videos, analogies, clips from movies or television. We need to think about auditory presentations, so podcasts. We need to think of small group dialogue. So I even like thinking about the learner as a resource. So if you're teaching them how to do small talk, for example, you can have them performing small talk, and that would be a resource of auditory presentation of what is small talk. And it could be some of the learners acting. That would be really useful. It's also important for us to provide a choice of working condition for the students. So if they do need a moment to work alone, to work in pairs, to work in groups of four, to work with a teacher, to work as a whole group. It's really important that they have this possibility of deciding and having lots of different options. Right. Let me show you some pictures and let's think of some examples of what we have just talked about. So this is a lesson from High Plus 2, so this should be taught in the second year of high school. And the objective of this lesson, as you can see here, is by the end of the lesson, students will be able to discuss inclusion and accessibility. So here, the proposal is that students take a look at some pictures. So first they have to know what kind of sport those pictures represent. So um, in the in the guideline, the first thing that students have to do is they need to talk about the different pictures. So it's here, look, pictures A to F. Tell students to look at the images and guess the parasport, and if necessary, you may randomly board their names and have learners match them to the pictures. So this could be done working in pairs if they know the name of the sport. If you think that's too easy for your learner, if they're ready to do more, they can think of the name and the rules. It could also be that they are given an opportunity to write. So first they write the name of the sport, and then in groups, they decide on the rule of one of the pictures of one of the sports. So just by doing that, you are giving them different options on how to work with this content, right? And then the lesson goes on, so students have to read some short texts and answer the questions based on the texts. So again, if we're going to differentiate based on learning preference, we need to be careful about how they're going to work to answer the questions, because some people might enjoy a more playful activity, like they have to work in stations and they have to, like, you can print the texts and glue them on different walls in the classroom, and students have to walk around read the texts and answer the questions, or they can even play a game like running dictation in order to answer the questions. Or in some cases, it might be useful for them to have a quiet moment in which they just read the text and answer the questions. If they are more analytical, in fact, for all learners, I feel that taking this opportunity to do some more analytical reflection on the text is really useful. So, for example, trying to understand what genre is this, where would they find a text like this, that could add um, it could add purpose to why they are reading a text like that. And then they can try to understand the features of this text. So what kind of verbs are being used, what kind of language. So why is it being used? For example, simple present, right in the first sentence, go ball is a team sport for athletes who can't see with a vision impairment. Goalball is a team sport for athletes who can't see or with a vision impairment. So a more analytical approach would be to ask them why you're using verb to be there. Sorry, not verb to be, but why you're using simple present there, which is, this is descriptive language, right? You're describing what goalball is and what are the rules. So they can try to take notes on how the rules are described, and then they can try to describe rules for other sports. That would be a more analytical approach. Perhaps a more creative approach would be to come up with a new parasport, as the objective of the lesson is to reflect on that. So think about a special need that is not being addressed by the lesson, by the texts, and then students have to come up with new rules for a sport that would cater for people that have that specific special need. So this could be something more creative that would engage students that have a more creative approach towards learning. I hope this information has been useful and that it helps you think about learner preference when you're planning your lessons.